right, we're back with another episode, and I am so excited to have with us Dr. Kylie Burton. Thank you so much, Dr. Kylie, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks, Dr. Megacy. You guys can already tell my voice is like, ooh, but we're gonna do this.
Yeah, Dr. Kylie has been so busy and using that voice a lot, so we're lucky to have you here.
Well, let's talk blood work because everybody has blood work,
Yes.
and we often get told that it's normal, yet we feel like crap. So what do we do in that instance besides turning to Dr. Google? So if you're listening to this, grab your blood work because I'm going to teach you a couple different markers that you can look at that are often bypassed by many doctors. Western medicine, functional medicine, alternative medicine, it doesn't matter. So the blood work you're looking for is this thing called the complete blood cell count. And that's known as the CBC. You're going to scroll down to the very bottom of it, and there's 5 markers there. And those 5 markers are known as the lymphocytes. It's been a while since I talked about this. Neutrophils come first, and then lymphocytes, and then monocytes, and then basophils and eosinophils. So those are the 5 markers you're looking for. And if you're wondering about causes of chronic fatigue and causes of anxiety and depression, this is a big key component. A lot of people will blame the thyroid, and the thyroid's a piece of it, but the thyroid is just one tiny itty bitty gland in your entire body that has a lot of other organs and a lot of systems that are all working hopefully together and smoothly. So when we have these things called infections, these infections can wreak havoc on every organ, every gland, every cell, every system of the body because they're known as systemic issues. So if you're a mom with chronic fatigue and you're like, I know something's wrong with me. I know I don't feel like I felt 5 years ago before I started having kids. Um, and yet every single time you go to the doctor, they take your blood work if you're lucky. And then they say, oh, your labs are normal. Maybe you just need some antidepressants. You're thinking, no, there's more to it. Guess what? You're right. And you're going to learn right here, right now, on what that more is. Okay. But I want to caveat this as I teach you these numbers. Don't go running to your doctor and saying that you have a bacterial infection or you're fighting a virus because they're just going to look at you like you're crazy and you need to get off the podcast listening and you need to stop listening to Dr. Google because they're the ones with the diplomas. So we're going to take our normal lab range and we're going to condense it and make it smaller. And that normal lab range now becomes a functional lab range. I'm not the person who came up with these functional lab ranges. I've tweaked them a little bit based off of the thousands of labs I've seen. But the doctor who did a lot of this about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago now, his name is Dr. Datis Karazian. He's one of those docs that has 9 trillion letters next to his name because, someone likes to go through that much schooling. Not me. So him and his team did it. And what we are looking at is more from the perspective of if you fit within these ranges, then you feel pretty good. But if you fall outside of these smaller ranges, now you're feeling crappy, but not crappy enough to elicit a positive test result or a positive diagnosis. So say you're someone with the chronic fatigue and you're like thinking that it's just the kids or you're just tired and you're not quite sure what's going on. Or you've got these mind games, you got some anxiety and depression going on that you've been battling for a while. And the antidepressants don't work and you're on loads and loads of vitamin D. And even though I think vitamin D is like a very simple solution to many mental stuff. But there's a key component here inside your blood work. So is that making sense, Dr. Betsy? I know that I can just keep going on for hours.
Yeah, I'm actually so excited about this because I'm thinking, as a traditional doctor, you're right. Like those labs, what you just mentioned, we only look at those when they're at a range and we go, oh, look, if the neutrophils are high, we go, oh, look, there's an infection. But then like I'm learning something from this.
It is different and it's very I mean, it's more often now that those 5 numbers are actually taken, but it has to be a CBC with differential to get those 5 markers, right? When it's just a CBC, you're missing those 5 pieces, and with all my schooling, I'm a chiropractor by degree. I'm one of those people who hate adjusting, so I gave that up a long time ago, and I just do the functional medicine. And I realized that we can spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on functional medicine tests, or we can learn how to read the blood work that they already have a better way.
Wow.
So these 5 markers I was never trained on. We never talked once about them. If I saw them, it was like, "Oh, just toss them out the window." And now it's like, if I don't get these markers in a blood panel, I really wanna just go slap the ordering physician. Say, "Just check this box. It's just right here next to it. Just check that box." But anyways, um, we could go on a long tangent about that, but there's no need. So if you're, like, wondering what labs you should ask your doctor to order, one of the biggest ones, I don't care what you're suffering from, is the CBC with differential. So let's pay attention to these 5 markers, okay? The very top marker is the neutrophil count. I want to see it around 60% or less. That's a good thing. If it's above 60%, now we're looking at bacterial infections. In the functional medicine world, these are known as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or CFO with an F, fungal. And there's no way to determine if you're having a fungal infection with the specific 5 markers, but co-infections are very, very popular and very, very common. So I always, if I'm treating bacterial, going to treat fungal at the same time. And I think you would agree with the
Yeah.
vaginal
Yeah.
infections. And these infections can be held anywhere. These aren't, it can be in your vaginal tract. You can have type 1 diabetes and they can be found in your pancreas. I mean, they're systemic and they're going to be housed in the weakest point of your body. So the bacterial infection is going to cause things like upset stomach, diarrhea. I'm thinking of, your commercial for Pepto-Bismol, like all the things. These are bacterial infections, and you can get diagnosed with IBS or IBD or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, but the underlying component are these infections. So if your neutrophil count is above 60%, 60, you're looking at bacterial and fungal infections. Then we're gonna go down to the next marker called lymphocytes. And these lymphocytes, their job is to fight viruses. So if the lymphocyte marker is above 30%, we're dealing with a low-grade viral infection. Now, people always ask me, well, what type of virus is it? I don't know, and I don't particularly care because it's not going to change my treatment plan. When it comes to viruses, especially things like Epstein-Barr virus, when you might get diagnosed with that at 18 and now you're like 42 and wondering why you have never been the same. We get this really dominant virus in our bodies known as mono, and it just comes and goes. So it's really active at some times where you're like totally depleted, you can barely function. And then there's times where it's like, oh, I feel pretty good today. I can do the dishes, I can sweep the floor, and I even remember to pick up my kids and make dinner rather than get takeout. So there's different stages of these viruses, how active and how dormant they are. We want them to be dormant. If your lymphocyte marker is above 30%, we're looking at more of an active virus. And again, I don't care. You're going to use things like vitamin D and antivirals anyway, so it doesn't affect treatment plan. Now, here's something cool, Dr. Betsy, and you'll think this is fascinating because of your MD background. Neutrophil count is at 60%, 60. Lymphocyte count is at 30. That's a 2-to-1 ratio, correct?
Yes.
What if the two numbers start to approach each other? So say the neutrophil count's 44% and the lymphocyte count is 40%. So we're looking more at a 1-to-1 ratio. Autoimmune.
Oh, interesting.
So now we can say, wait a second, you might have a ton of symptoms. You have 25 symptoms in your chart and not have a single diagnosis. Or you can have 4 diagnoses and 25 symptoms. It doesn't matter. What matters is that, wait, now we know that your immune system is attacking parts of your body. What it attacks depends upon what your genetics tell it to attack. So now the treatment goes to the immune system, aka the gut, and figuring out how do we calm the immune system down, remove the triggers, and feed it what it needs so that it stops attacking our thyroid for Hashimoto's, our spine in multiple sclerosis, our large intestines in Crohn's, our joints in rheumatoid arthritis. You see how this all comes together?
This is absolutely fascinating. And actually, we're gonna take a break. I can't wait to find out more after the commercial break.
80% of women will develop a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. There is relief. There is hope. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.
And we're back with Dr. Kylie Burton, and I'm just incredibly fascinated with everything you have to say. All right, so let's get back into it.
Okay, so we've covered the neutrophils, the lymphocytes. Now, I know you guys are smart as you're listening to this, and you're thinking, okay, neutrophils, I'm going to go grab my labs right now. All right, my neutrophil count is at 58%. My lymphocyte count is at 42%, and so on and so forth. People ask me a lot, what if it's low? So you look at your neutrophil count and it's like 32%. And immediately I think something has to be high because all 5 of these markers must add up to 100%. So if your neutrophil count's really low, the ebbs and flows of the simple addition, something else has got to be really high. So pay attention to the really high marker. Okay. Okay. So we've done neutrophils, bacterial and fungal infections. We've done lymphocytes are viral. Dr. Betsy, monocytes are also viral. And they can be paired specifically with the Epstein-Barr virus, aka mono. Now, you're not going to get a positive Epstein-Barr virus test unless your monocyte count is like above 12%. It's got to be really high to elicit a positive test result. But for those of us and those many of us moms who are suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome, and I even had a teenager one day, I was working with his mom, and his mom said something to me like her 17-year-old son is a really good kid at school, but he cannot keep his eyes open. He's falling asleep. She'll wake him up and get ready for school. He falls asleep on the couch. He falls asleep during class. And so I just, go grab some blood work for me and see, and let me know. Monocyte count was at 15%. And I jokingly said to her, if you were to go get Epstein-Barr virus tested, it would come back positive. So she did. And it came back positive, but they didn't bother checking it until I, told them, go ask for this specific test. So what do you get told when you have Epstein-Barr virus? Good luck. Sleep lots. Drink lots of water. When in reality, it's a virus. We need to support our immune system to help take care of that. But anywhere between 7 and 12%. 7% is like the marker. If it's less than 7, that's pretty good. If it's above 7, that chronic fatigue is being caused by a virus. That anxiety and depression is being caused by a virus. The Hashimoto's is being caused by a virus because it's triggering your immune system to attack your thyroid. Okay, so all these infections that we can find in our basic standard blood tests, if you know how to read it right, can lead to a whole I don't want to say multitude. There we go. A whole multitude of symptoms and diagnoses. Now, here's the last 2 markers. And I like to pinpoint these because in the functional medicine world and the alternative world, parasites like to become a hot topic. And depending on who you're listening to, depends on their ideas about parasites. You've heard them, right, Dr. Betsy?
Yeah, yeah.
Some people say that if you have a pulse, you have parasites. Some people say you don't have parasites unless you travel to third world countries.
That's
Some
what we
people
were taught in
say,
medical
yep,
school.
yep. Some people say you can get parasites from your cats and dogs and any other animal, or just simply from your food. When food goes bad or have some type of like E. coli is more bacterial, but you get the logistics. So I'm not so sure if I believe the whole everyone has a pulse and you have a parasite problem. But what I do know is that I'm going to treat for parasites if my eosinophil count is really high or my basophil count is really high. And that's after the bad foods have been eliminated. Because these same two markers, so if your eosinophil count is above 3%, and if your basophil count is above 1%, I'm going to first look at diet. A lot of times, by the time people get to us, they've eliminated everything under the sun. And it's my job to then help them start eating more food again rather than take food out of their diet. But if they haven't done that, we're going to eliminate the big culprits because those are two markers for food sensitivities, right? But the next step would be parasites. And there's a lot of different modalities and treatment plans, homeopathics, there we go. A lot of different options for parasites. But if you're wondering, like, hey, should I do this parasite cleanse? Go grab your blood work and see. And you can tell from those two markers. Make sense?
That makes absolute sense. And it's funny that you say that about parasites because we were taught in medical school, like, oh, you have to travel to like these third world countries to get parasites. When I started doing microbiome testing and stool testing on patients, all of a sudden we were picking them up on those tests. And I'm going, oh my God, what do I do with this? This is not stuff that traditional medicine has taught me anything about. So it's fascinating that we can also find these signs in the blood work. So
And you get a lot of people because of how popular the whole idea of parasites are. And you put a parasite video on TikTok, it's going to go viral. It's a hot commodity. And it can be something where people will spend years and years and years supposedly destroying these parasites. But on the other hand, they can also be a good thing. I've had podcast episodes where I've recorded interviews with people who, they get some crazy diagnosis like cancer or RA or something like some autoimmune disease. And they travel to like Mexico and they get treatments there and they're actually giving infections or bacterial and fungal and parasites because they're a good thing at times. So the world of medicine is so fun.
This is really fascinating. And I think it's so amazing that a lot of people, if you've been to a doctor at some point in time, these are basic labs that you probably have in your history and can go back, which if you don't have them available now, I'm like, go back and re-listen to this episode because you can like walk through and go, and then be able to, bring that information and, make a difference.
Yeah.
So yes.
Just remember, don't go run to your doctor and tell them that you have parasites. Don't go run to your functional medicine doctor either, because they probably don't know what you're talking about and they'll muscle test you or something like that. But trust your gut, trust your instincts, trust your intuition.
So if the listener is looking at their labs now and they go, oh my gosh, what should their steps be then?
Go grab my book on Amazon. Why are my labs normal? Because it's going to get into not only the CBC, but other labs as well. So you can literally be the best person to read your own labs. And you don't need to have a medical background to do this. Like, as you can tell, I can break it down pretty simply. And then it will walk you through, okay, now that you have all of these pieces to your puzzle, so if we think about our health as one big puzzle piece, the more markers we have, the more puzzle pieces we have to put the puzzle together. So I'm a big fan of getting a lot of blood work. And it will walk you through all of those puzzle pieces, what you'll find in that blood work. And then my 5-step plan to, okay, here's where you're at. Now let's go on this healing journey. And that healing journey is going to consist of 5 different steps. So you can go from where you are to where you want to be. We're not treating symptoms, we're not treating diagnoses, we're just treating you as a whole person. And we're helping your body get healthy. And when you get healthy, the symptoms and the diagnoses, they start to go away.
This has been really amazing. I love all the information that you shared. Where can people find out more information about you?
One, the book, two, my podcast, Beyond the Diagnosis with Dr. Kylie, doing all sorts of things like blood work and examples and anything else I can think of comes on that podcast. That would be the best place. And then the third step would be follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Dr. Kylie Burton.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Kylie, for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad my voice held up. I didn't have to cough too much.
Well, we'll let you go rest your voice now. Have a great day.